Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Open Source Office. Once again, this is Tex, Open Source Program Manager here at Intersect. Today, I am joined by Aquara, I hope I'm saying that correctly, and Mr. Thies. Mrs. Thies, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, what's up? My name is Thijs, and I'm the founder and project lead of Aquara, the world's first decentralized water fund building on Cardano, and very, very excited to get into it with you, Tex. And thank you so much for inviting us. It's a pleasure. Love that Christmas vibes that you got going on as well. It's it's perfect.
Yes, well, thank you. We are right up against the holiday season there, Tice, and apologize on the name there. Sure, that's not the first time, but hopefully we can get that straight for the future. All
All
right.
good.
Yeah, no, Aquara definitely sounds very interesting. Can you tell us some more about Aquara getting involved here with Cardano? What specific problem are you guys aiming to solve, and how can building on Cardano help you guys with that?
Yeah, yeah. So essentially, like the idea for Aquara started with something quite massive, which a lot of people are not really aware of or think of in their daily lives, and that's the water economy. And that sounds very abstract to a lot of people, but it's essentially this idea that you have a water economy which spans $6 to $7 trillion in pure wealth. And what we're seeing in the water economy is at the same time it's very undervalued, and there is a huge inflow expected to come in from governments, from institutional capital as well. We're seeing a $1 trillion funding gap in the World Bank, and the main issue that we really identified was this idea that there's no way for retail to actually enter the water economy, or even most professionals, which is a massive problem when you're speaking about a sector that's going to grow into the multi-trillions in the coming decades. And so we really started to think of how can we design new financial systems for not just water, really, also resource finance as a whole. But we were very aligned, especially in the beginning, that water is the most important resource that we have. The assets around water, meaning the companies, the infrastructure providers, treatment producers, all those things are some of the most critical infrastructure and some of the most critical companies that we're going to need in the future. I think you as well, Tex, being from the US, a fact is that like the US has a D plus infrastructure grade on its water systems. That's quite sickening, to be honest. Like, and it got to change. And the governments are well aware, the companies are well aware, and it would be a shame if we don't have open systems to really yeah, give retail also a voice. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to not only create a water-backed treasury, but also opening it up, making it transparent on chain, and creating a multi-layered governance model which will allow everyone to really participate. So that's what we're bringing to Cardano. The first of its kind, the whole new investable category, decentralized resource finance, and we're rolling it out for water finance first. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I know that I've spoken to a number of contributors within the Cardano ecosystem. A number of those are what do you say, passionate about different ecosystem or ecological concerns and factors. So very, very happy to hear about this and see how we can continue to support in this effort. If we dive down into kind of more as what the open source part of this is, or what I guess we'll get there as we go along. But what are some of the technologies currently on Cardano that Aquara is currently evaluating, or planning to design around future phases or future development, and why and how were you guys able to decide on those?
Yeah, so I think like we're coming at it really from a framework first. Like we want to be transparent, we want to get the proper governance framework set up, the proper treasury set up, before we really dive into code itself. So right now our main focus on technical integrations is really just building out how the treasury would function, how the governance would look. Of course, being open to change that as we progress. We've also learned a lot of how Cardano has done things and looked into also different DAOs in the space, like MakerDAO, now Sky, for instance. But in terms of pure technical integrations, Cardano is very interesting because it has its CNTs, which is great for quick implementation if you want to get, especially because we're working with governance. So that's an easy way to integrate governance participation early, and also you have the metadata for transparency. Pluto's later on when you want to start, optimizing for more complex treasury decisions. Also, because we're dealing with water, which is complex from a lot of legislative standpoints. I think it's not specific Cardano, but like the midnight thing is going on at the moment, and this idea that you could have private smart contracts as well within the treasury is interesting. Obviously, Cardano also have a lot of passport IDs. When we speak about doing governance, we want to make sure that it's done in a responsible way, and therefore we need people to essentially be transparent and open about who they are when they do this, whether it's an institutional capital or retail holder. And then later on for integration, I know the Cardano Foundation has worked with Originate. So this idea that we can start we could even potentially start to track water rights on the protocol as well. Are we talking 10 to 15 years out, right? But that's a possibility as well. So there's a lot of stuff being built out on Cardano, which definitely could be integrated in our protocol. And we're looking forward to explore it.
Absolutely. So I understand some of this may still be in early development, but you talk a lot about governance and the design of the treasury here. And so how have you guys approached the topic of transparency, auditability, just general trust? Like, is there a particular direction that Cardano typically uses that you guys want to really just kind of follow and copy paste, or is there a method of improvement that you see with that? I don't want to get too far in the specifics of your own development here, but if we can keep that generalized, what's inspired you so far, and what might you want to do differently?
Yeah, I think like the first thing that really fascinated me to like around Cardano 4 years ago when I started hearing about it was this idea that you took a very slow and academic approach. And I think that that's one of the most undervalued things in the crypto space. You're really seeing a lot of protocols just shoot for the moon and not really be very deliberate with how they do their designs. And that's also why you see so many utility tokens collapse, because they simply didn't have any proper backing or strategy behind them. So I think that what's really our approach is that we put as mentioned, the core structure and want to create that and essentially open it up to, we're building out an institutional advisory board. I am very open on this idea that I do not know anything at all, really. And I need academics, I need water investors, I need investment bankers, I need all the people who know all the stuff that I don't. And I think that that's really where trust in it, trust in the protocol will come from this idea that we're being transparent, we're doing public reporting, and we're being very clear also on the scope as well. A thing that I think people mostly get wrong about when we just speak about treasury is this idea that are you going to own water itself? Like that sounds mental. We would not support that. I completely agree. And that's why we're being very open around like we investing in the water economy, meaning the companies in there and the kind of producers that allows us to gain water access or make a water, impact more sustainable. So it's kind of like, we believe in like us being open and willing to change as well. Obviously the protocol have changed a lot since I initially started building it a year ago, even in like, scope and idea. And I think that comes kind of with the Cardano approach as well, where we need to include people to create something that people can actually use. And sometimes, people fully agree with your process, otherwise they don't, but you can always learn something wherever people's ideas of what your building is. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking.
For sure. Yeah, I really do believe that one of the most unique things in the Cardano ecosystem, specific to the governance and really the way that the community works and functions, is the real difference between your dissenters and your agreeers, if you will.
Yeah.
And then the fact that they work together cohesively, and we're still moving forward despite what looks like, some pretty high level difficulty. We can do this again towards a little bit more of the code or the open source nature of this a little bit. And I'm curious, have you guys developed a policy for how you plan to open source your code that you develop, kind of your versions of this? And are there any dependencies that you guys are planning to, like, do you currently rely on or plan to rely on as you continue your development?
Yeah, I think that the core idea of what we're building out is to try to align it as much as possible with open source values, but we got to be careful because there is like you don't want to introduce unnecessary risk, especially around the treasury. But I think that our default position is to really open source it wherever it's sensible, especially in the beginning, and then the interesting thing is that there is also a lot of the early tooling that we'll need is already available from an open source perspective. So we're kind of already integrating ourselves in that and being aligned on that. And then our core idea and the thing that we're building is that we're very clear on we're building up an open system for how to do resource finance. And so we'd also like the framework to be reusable for even governments or Cardano itself around how Cardano does governance potentially down the line as well. It could impact different protocols that's not just ours. And especially for the governance, we'd like to open source everything we can really.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do we look at essentially our target audience here? As far as I think you've mentioned this a little bit, that we're going to be looking at actual governments and integrating this governance or these governance ideals from Cardano into an actual existing government structure. So we can maybe focus a little bit on that part, but then also what is the need for Aquara when it comes to actual developments? Where are you guys going to need support to continue building this effectively?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just firstly, maybe to touch on the user base. The idea is to kind of mix different industries here. So first and foremost, like you have like I would call it like the economic, from the economic perspective, someone who just wants exposure to the water economy who never was able to. Water is traditionally the most stable asset in the world. So someone who wants exposure to that, it could even be the Cardano treasury down the line once we bring out more of these kind of resource aligned protocols for just a hedge. And someone who wanted to be governed transparently. And that could be both institutions, but it could also just be the retail holder really who wanted to be governed in a transparent and open way. And then what we're seeing inside of crypto, just also from a user perspective, is that you have, I think we almost reached like $4 trillion in pure wealth on the like blockchain sector. And the idea that less than 1% of that is currently going into real world assets. And that you see the biggest TradFi institutions like BlackRock and Blackstone moving in on this RWA narrative. This idea that 0% currently goes into water assets is just a massive opportunity. And that's something where we could onboard potentially other crypto users from other ecosystems into Cardano to get exposure to that. You have, of course, the Cardano community itself as a whole, as a holder and a user. We're talking, I think, what 3 million users. You can correct me afterwards if I'm wrong, Tex. And then, of course, the Bitcoin as well, because we're doing right now. We haven't cleared out the number exactly. In the beginning, it was 50% in Bitcoin, probably going to be lower because of the volatility. But we are also trying to onboard essentially the Bitcoin community onto Cardano via the treasury and how we do the setup. And then, of course, there's going to be water companies that are looking to receive funding. There's going to be water startups. And then water interested investors as well. But those will come after we formate the proper governance frameworks and create. We got a whole governance structure. We can get into that a bit later. But yeah, that's like the use and who we're targeting. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's definitely a big push towards real world assets. I've seen that over the last year, and I think it's going to be really important to actually start getting traction in that category for use of various blockchains here, as you've mentioned. I think we actually kind of get into a little bit more of the governance piece now, and so I'm curious with a governance structure that appears to, I would say, work for the most part, right? Probably 80 to 90% effective. How would what Aquara is going to build upon or improve upon, how is that going to help Cardano in terms of its treasury and governance framework mature?
Yeah. So I think that what we've been very deliberate on is this idea that you want to kind of mix institutional capital with retail. And I think that that's how the best structures are kind of created. So in the beginning, we actually worked a lot with maybe also even having like a DREB layer, like a water DREB layer. But what we saw really was that it could also get very politicized once you have a lot of different influencers out and about, which aren't necessarily experts in the fields. And so for us, it was about like really creating at the core, and that's also where we start to see actually the protocol getting some respect from institutions was because we took this approach where we said, no, we need councils, and we need like a bunch of different councils which are working together, which are doing the day-to-day operations and are approving things under a certain mandate. And then it's only like the bigger decisions around changing the constitution, having major decisions around where we'll go in terms of investment direction and different industries inside of the water economy and such, that would be available to the full community, where the councils themselves would kind of control most of it through mandates. And then of course you could vote on the council members as well. But yeah, we're still working a lot of that out, but that's kind of like the approach that we're taking with the governance framework. And then we're being very deliberate as well in the terms of, as I mentioned, slow and steady. So we're taking a 12-year decentralization roadmap where we'll start out with essentially it being centralized. I'm a big firm believer in that decentralization doesn't just happen overnight. It's something that you shape together with a community. And as we talked about before, you agree or disagree on certain things, and then the protocol move along. And it's almost like it's like time that's like hardening the narrative. And once you got that narrative in place, then you'll start to fully decentralize it, because then, you know, the narrative, it's much harder for the narrative to get corrupted, as opposed if you just, you know, released it and said and prayed for the best. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, relative to the last two questions here, I'm really curious, and I don't want to be, I guess, putting forth too many ideas, but I'm curious what a policy from Aquara's standpoint of doing business for public good looks like. And you know, I don't want to assume I know too much about what you guys are planning for as a business, but it would seem like that would be very, very important to really put some guardrails around who are going to be those decision makers, not only from the community perspective, but when it comes to actually associating something like delegate representatives for, you know, be it the councils or just the mainline high level decisions there. So,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. So I think like, and very important, and I mentioned earlier, and that I don't know anything, and that's why we've been speaking to so many different experts in so many different fields. I almost have, like, you know, conversations daily with people who might move into those council positions, who have already started to shape the direction that we're taking, and that we make sure that once we get even close to this decentralization, or the, yeah, decentralized system, then we'll have the proper guardrails in place. We have published bunch of documentation out there as well on the website of how we intend to align with the SDG goals. Now, it's two weeks since I brought in my treasury lead, 8 years in water finance. He started like combining the portfolio, and already there we're running into different how would you say, challenges around how do you actually create a portfolio that is the most sustainability aligned and open and accessible to everyone, because the idea is that you do not just want to recreate a water ETF, because, yeah, again, everyone has access to that. You want to start investing in different things, and so it's something that we've just started shaping. And I think that over the coming months and years, once we get more expertise in, and we really formulate our institutional board, then we'll have a clearer answer of what exactly, how the first portfolio is going to look. But we are constructing it with an SDG UN mindset as well, and we want to make it as sustainable and as impactful as possible. Obviously, like, early thoughts was like, are you going to add Nestle and Coca-Cola because they do a lot with water and they also claim to be impactful, but they also have a lot of downsides? And it's like, okay, we got to have some more ethical conversations around what that composition might look like, because Coca-Cola might give you great returns, but yeah, if they're drilling in Mexico and completely depleting Mexican resources, then maybe that's not the route you want to take, right? So we're still in a very exploratory phase. But yeah.
I must admit, I get really, really curious about what this looks like 10, 12, 15 years down the road. But that's not super impactful, I would say, to the direction or trajectory of Cardano right now, right in this moment. So maybe we can get a little bit more detailed on what is it that Aquara is currently building, and what is earmarked as a future development, maybe in the next 3 to 5 years, that builds on top of what Aquara needs for, again, your governance and treasury system, but what also, again, gives back to benefit the Cardano ecosystem and in general open source developers.
Yeah. So just to touch base really quick on like where we're at the moment, we're really formulating the treasury out, and it's like we're at a phase zero. It's like you can imagine that you wouldn't just go with an ETF with zero capital in and then release that to the public because that would be a worthless ETF. So it's more like we need to kind of raise the capital to seed the treasury, and then we need to get the proper technical implementation done. And now a lot of that is open sourced already on Cardano in terms of, and in the beginning especially, it's going to be a simple governance dashboard. We are looking into raising funds through Catalyst, Fund 15, to really just get a simple MVP out there with a simple tech stack that we can build on. We're not, again, we're working with these frameworks and preliminary governance frameworks. We're not trying to do quadratic voting from day one or try to integrate a complex votings around how we'll do the constitution, but more around just having a place where the team from the beginning can put out decisions to the community and let them participate from day one. Again, not with the most major financial decisions, but with decisions around the protocol, and then also shaping a treasury dashboard. We also have some, I can send them to you later, but they're also on the GitHub. We have some mock-ups around how that would look, and really like tying the financial value into a treasury dashboard. And then you could see on your AQA holdings how much water you've helped purify, what kind of impact do you have, where in certain areas in the world are you impacting. And then, yeah, we hope that these kind of frameworks can kind of be like the first guiding star on Cardano to how you could uh, attempt to do decentralized resource finance. But in terms of the first 5 years, it will be mostly team led until we get a proper foundation set up, until we get the council set up as well. So from a technical implementation, it will much, especially in the beginning, it will be much lighter than I first anticipated as well. And I think that the more complex tech stuff will come later, and that's where you'll see the contribution. But yeah, as mentioned, we plan to open source wherever it makes sense, and also contribute to Cardano. It could even be through grants later on, once the protocol matures, and if there is specific tech being built out to Cardano that aligns with what the protocol needs, that could be supported through grants as well. So yeah.
Gotcha. We've talked a little bit, maybe not so much on this call, but about how yourself and Aquara are really getting integrated here with the Cardano community. I'm curious what that means from an actual community engagement standpoint. So, based on your experience, what is Aquara looking at as far as community engagement in general? Is there a specific path that you guys are trying to follow to get some of the Cardano community to jump on board with what you're building?
Yeah, as mentioned, like I'm all about transparency, and I was early out on different AMAs as well on Cardano, and just getting grilled by the community completely. People were like, "Water rights, like on the blockchain, that's never going to work." And I had to, I had a bunch of conversations, and that's where I learned so much, really, because I think that the power of the Cardano community comes from this idea that we are all open to share ideas with each other, but we're also open to be constructive in the way that we kind of, yeah, do these conversations. And we've been speaking to so many senior people, we've been speaking to totally newcomers as well. And it's been important for us that we have been transparent through the process. Like I got the idea a year ago, and after 2 weeks, I had a prototype for the website up and launched so that people could come with ideas. Um, Early me went into Reddit groups as well and had conversations with different Cardano supporters there that helped shape the idea. We just launched our Discord as well, so that we're starting to get a little bit more community focused. And then it's just like our focus is just to listen to the community, what they think, and take the part of it that makes the most sense to us, and try to align with it, because it's going to be the users that are going to benefit from this in the end. And if we end up designing something that no one really wants, then doesn't make sense. So again, the idea has moved like from where it was from a year ago to where it is now. It's unrecognizable. I was never imagining talking sovereign wealth fund language or speaking in like with institutional capital. I was just like, let's free water. And like, I hope the Cardano community is with me. And now like suddenly we have all these other crazy conversations, and the thing has just blown off in a way which I did not expect. But that came because the Cardano community was there to kind of carry the idea with us. And I think that that's extremely valuable. Yeah.
That's amazing. All right, we're pretty much at the end here. I think we talked quite a bit about governance and decentralization, again, at least at a high level here. So, the last question that I have for you is regarding documentation and resources. So, what do you have that's currently available for the Cardano community to really get read up and involved and become, let's say, helpful contributors?
Yeah. So what we have essentially is 160 pages of documentation on our Doc Hub in the website. I'd say like for core reference points, jump into the light paper. It takes 10 minutes to read, and then you'll get the hang of the basic idea there. And then we have a bit longer white paper. Obviously, these things has also moved into different iterations. At one point, the white paper was 130 pages. Now it's like 16. So you kind of had to, and that just goes to show the journey, right? Like you get so much information in your head, and suddenly you have to pick the most important stuff out there. And so what we've seen is really a lot of our documentation have evolved alongside with people getting exposed to the idea and receiving that feedback. And I think that that's also one of the most important things that we've gotten is that feedback to really help strengthening the core documentation. And I think that we'll get proper technical documentation as we start to move into that phase, which we aren't really at yet. We have a GitHub. It's not impressive. Like there's a bunch of stuff in there, but it's not really that heavily technical. And I think that once we start move towards the technical path, the more technical path, we'll have a lot more information on our GitHub as well. So yeah, that's where to find it, and all the links are at the website. So feel free to visit aquara.io.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's right up the alley here. I try not to talk too much about a personal mission or goal that I have. Typically, I try to make sure that whatever I am discussing is well aligned with what the community is asking for. And so, on what you mentioned for improving those documents and things, or getting to that technical side, I'm definitely working with. We have some developer advocates, and we're constantly reaching out to other developers in the ecosystem. One of the main things that I've kind of kept an eye on or focus on is the documentation piece, and how can we make that more understandable? Even though it gets technical, how can we make it, a little bit easier to use at the very least? So I'm excited to see how Cardano can help give some benefit to Aquara from that perspective. Well, that being said, as we're getting down to the end here, is there anything else that we should know about Aquara before we close off for today?
I think it's maybe important to like state that we are at an intersection here, and we are sitting at a forefront which no one has really explored before. And I think that we see blockchains grow when they present something to the masses that have never been presented before or attempted. And I think that Cardano has done a great work with really creating the foundations of what is to be this hopefully massive blockchain protocol. So I think that the next step to take is really to start to explore these different categories that could bring large amounts of institutional capital and make the world a fairer place simultaneously. So yeah, that's what I would leave you with.
You bet. Well, definitely thanks so much, Tice, for your time. Thank you for sharing some more with us about Aquara. I think it's definitely aligned with some of the, I guess, more on the technical side of what we're trying to push and sponsor from the ideas of the paid open source model. So I'm really keen to see how these interact together as we move forward. But we'll get this out to the community there. If anyone has any comments or questions, needs to reach out to Aquara, please don't forget, or don't feel like you can't leave a comment, please do so. Drop us a like, give us a subscribe on the channel, because there's always more spotlights coming. Thanks for helping us kind of close out the end of the year here for spotlights. I think you are probably going to be the final one. So I don't know if that's a
appreciate it, Dex. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll sign it off for here from the open source office for now, and have a great one.